Hi, I'm Jeff Hawk, the host of the New York Real Estate Power Players podcast, and I want to welcome you to the show. On the program today with me, I'm excited to have my guest, Noah Puzzi, CEO of Ripple Analytics. Welcome to the show, Noah.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
You bet. So it's been an amazing journey. I got to know you about a year or so ago through business networking, some common friends of ours. Shout out to Adam Holzer and some of the crew that we know. And we got to talking. As you know, I'm in commercial real estate now, and I also have a great love about technology and technology enablement for the industry as a whole and just innovative tech products. So that's kind of how we got connected. But for the benefit of the audience, can you talk about yourself and Ripple Analytics? What is the solution and what does it do for companies?
Sure. Ripple Analytics was formed to cure a pain point many organizations have, and that's accurately, genuinely tracking and assessing their people. Ripple's mission is to replace the annual review with something that's dynamic, tech-driven, data-based decision making, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of unintentional bias in the review systems most organizations employ to monitor, develop their people. And what we want to do is make that process more effective, more productive. If you're going to do something, do it right. And we're industry agnostic. We can work with any company that's interested in gathering feedback and using that feedback to make their organizations more dynamic and more culture driven.
Sure. And I think that was one of the things that I was attracted to for a couple of parts. Number one, I was a manager for many, many years where I had to do the annual review process, and it was a dreadful process.
Yep.
It was also a way or a means to figure out how you were going to dole out 3%. And, it was either 2.9 or 3.1. So there wasn't much that I could do there. So, that in that regard, this resonated with me. The other part is when we were going, in the early stages of COVID, as a commercial real estate broker, I was already hearing rumblings from a lot of companies. We're going to get rid of the offices. We're going to cancel the office. We don't need it anymore. And our people are just as productive as they were before. And my belief system was based on what? And I think we talked about, in the beginning of it, there was some artificiality to that. Productivity looked good because people were afraid about their employment and they felt that they should really buckle down. And as we got further into the year, I think the real truth started coming out in some organizations where the productivity that was initially there in March wasn't as much so in, later months. And that's why I was kind of intrigued about Ripple Analytics, because I was like, before you make a real estate decision and cancel your office, wouldn't it be wise to do some analytics work, some reporting, and really see if what you think about the productivity, the engagement, the happiness of the crew is really at the level that you think it is. So I want you to spend some time talking about that and really, experientially what you're seeing in companies that have been using it during this time period and how it's in effect helping to guide their decisions, whether they bring everyone back or end up in some hybridized state with their company and their offices.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to digest in terms of a few of your questions, but I mean, the central focus of organizations post March 2020 was trying to get their arms around how to drive levels of productivity in a remote setting. A lot of companies had knee-jerk reactions, and I think that plays to what you're talking about in terms of just canceling your lease and having everyone work from home. There are people, human beings. We talk about employees as employees, talent, human capital, even, but we're all human beings and we all have different personalities. So what Ripple does is we track the 5 core personalities every one of us exhibits, and you can use that data to see, if you're not going to go all remote, who those employees that are best suited to be remote. And I do think there was some artificial productivity numbers when people were scared about losing their jobs and they just, were working more but were they really productive, or were they just working more? And there's a huge difference between those two concepts.
Mhm.
What Ripple does is we empower managers and owners to see data based on colleague feedback. They complete short surveys on their coworkers, and you can see how positive or negative that interaction is. And when you're not seeing everyone in person every day or 3 days a week, during as the traditional model of the workplace experience, for owners and managers to have that information available is key. And again, whether they're working from home or whether they're working in the office, gathering that data and using that data to make more productive decisions is important.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. Let's go back a little bit. So I know from your background, you had a practice of law.
Mhm.
Sometimes you laugh and you say you're a recovering lawyer. I know that. I've heard it a couple of times.
Yep.
How do you go from being an attorney doing work in the real estate space or a lot of transactional work to now founding a company that's involved with employee engagement and wellness? What was the journey that got you to Ripple?
Sure. I'll go back to 2011. One of my dear friends, Derek Hedges, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer,
Mm.
and he fought for over 4 years and eventually succumbed to the cancer. But in early 2014, a year before he passed, we were talking about life. I mean, events like that in your life make you really sort of become a little bit more appreciative of what you have and what you want to do and how you want to do it. And I was a commercial litigator and transactional attorney for 16 years at the time. And I'd gotten to that stage of, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Right. I was 44, and this is it. I either make a change now or I don't. And right along that time, early 2014, Derek had approached me saying, we just went through our review process. He worked at a Fortune 500 company. He was SVP of strategy, dynamic guy, really just a great guy. And he goes, how can we change the review process? And at the time, I had been on my own in my own practice for 3 years, but I managed a firm in the city, and we used to do the annual review every December, mid-December, and it was just this tortured process, this just ineffective, horrible, anxiety-ridden process. And so I only had a few people working for me at the law firm at my own practice, and I would try to interact with them throughout the year in terms of goals and what they were looking to accomplish. And so Derek in 2014 said, well, why don't we change the way organizations do this process? And we worked with a guy named Mark Nevins and Dr. Frank Shipper. And we created this process. It's all psychology driven. And the reason I gave up my full-time practice of law was I was actually happy doing this. I was actually driven to get Ripple into organizations. I saw the net benefit just from an actual usership perspective, for the old process, the old broken process that people just they cling to because they know it's the devil they know argument, right? We've been doing it forever. Why would we change? Well, you change things because they're not the right way to do it. And if there's a solution that can make your organization stronger, then why wouldn't you implement that? So I gave up. You're always a lawyer, but you're not a full-time lawyer. And it's good for the soul because you're not constantly arguing about everything. Ripple's a positive. Ripple's something that helps solve a problem. And
Sure.
law all too often, you create problems so that you can get in a court and litigate, and it's no way to go through life.
Yeah. Unfortunate and sorry to hear about your friend. Sounds like a real
Yeah.
super guy and a real inspiration. So we'll think of him today on the show and pay tribute to him.
Thanks.
Talk a little bit about the questions and how the system actually works. So it's web-based application,
Yep.
not too hard to interact with, but the underpinnings of it, like you touched on before, there's some industrial organizational psychology. There's some real good meat there around how the questions are thought about or thought out. So let's
Yeah.
cover that.
So we worked with the IO psychologist, Dr. Frank Shipper, to really make it a science-based exercise. The annual review is often a knee-jerk, unintentionally biased, subjective exercise. The human brain only remembers things accurately for 6 to 8 weeks. So if you do anything on an annualized basis, you're really getting, if you have someone that overperforms the 8 weeks before his or her evaluation, then they're going to be improperly inflated in terms of that experience. And then if you have someone that underperforms for those 6 to 8 weeks before their review, that person's going to be improperly dinged down and not respected for what they may have done for the 10 months prior to the last 2 months. So what we did is we worked with Dr. Shipper, and we created these questions that are all personality based. They all fall into one of 5 personality buckets: curiosity, conscientiousness, commitment, cooperation, and consistency. And we track that data throughout the employee's annual work cycle. So the managers are getting information all the time. There are dashboards available so they can see where people are doing well, where people are struggling, and address those points. A key component to Ripple is driving self-awareness. So all the questions you answer for your colleagues, you also do a self-survey. So you answer those questions about yourself. And that correlation between your colleague score and your self score is indicative of how self-aware you are in those personality traits. Why is self-awareness important? Self-awareness, it's shown that self-aware employees are happier, which is a huge plus. They're more productive, which is the ROI that most managers and owners want to see, to implement Ripple, and strengthens culture. They stay around longer. So if you're self-aware, you're more often to stay at that position so that people around you see that the organization's a good place to work at. Noah's been there for 8 years. Something must be right here. And so, yeah, we grow on those 3 elements of self-awareness.
It's fascinating, and I think back to my days when I was in very large IT shop.
Mm-hmm.
For the purpose of this conversation, there was a party, we'll call him X, and X thought he was the greatest, and everyone else really didn't see it that way. Yeah. And there was some managers that he had done a good job of influencing, not on a 6-week basis, but maybe in a way kissing up to them. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in a room with one of my guys that worked for me, and he had said to the senior manager, and the dialogue went something like, well, you don't like the guy, and you don't like X. And he's like, no, Jerry, I think 1,000 people don't like X, and maybe you should pay a little bit more attention to that. Yeah. And how valuable and powerful would a tool like this have been when he could have really got his eyes a little bit wider open on maybe there really is something there. And it wasn't that the guy X was not talented. X was extremely talented, but he was also extremely abrasive to people, and he didn't realize it. And only after you really held his feet to the fire would he realize, like, yeah, I'm a little bit overboard, or I'm sorry for doing it. And I think that's part of the genius of the tool, is that you're not doing a temperature check, once or twice a year. You're doing it on a consistent basis. Look, this has been a very, very difficult year for people. Personally, hundreds of thousands of people in our own country have had losses in their own family. It threw a lot of people sideways, obviously could affect their work performance. I think by consistently checking temperature and seeing how people are doing and how the workplace is doing over a larger span of time, yeah, you could understand why someone had a bad month in April and then recovered in July and August. It's impossible from my perspective, and as a manager for a zillion years, how that works when you're doing it basically once a year. It just really is not indicative of how things are going with the person or the organization, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fundamental problem with the 2 words that make up the annual review. Annual meaning you're only doing it once every 12 months, and then review meaning it's back there. It's not current. It's not forward thinking. And what Ripple does is we allow managers to see trends, to track data, and even, some people have seasonal personality disorders. We can track that. We can see, Jeff's level of self-awareness in February and March is much lower than in July, August, and September. And you know what? As we all evolve with technology and the use of data, the concept of using data to make objective decisions is huge, because you know what? Maybe we push Jeff to take his vacation in February and March because he needs some warm weather. It sounds silly, but if you have data that supports those types of decisions, then why wouldn't you use the data to accomplish the goal of having Jeff be as productive as he possibly can? And one of the key components to Ripple is when managers track data, they might see a spike, they might see a drop. Go talk to that employee at that point. Don't, and find out, I lost my uncle to COVID in April. My scores go down. Have that manager approach me and say, what's going on? Is everything okay? It might be that I'm working with this new client and I can't get on the same page as them. It's frustrating, or it might be my uncle, but the impact that the employee has when the manager comes up to them and says, hey, what's going on? I saw your scores dipped. Do you want to talk about it? And, to say, oh, well, do you need to take a day or two off? If you're grieving your uncle, take a couple of days off. Meanwhile, if you wait till December to have that annual review and you're like, you were kind of off in April and May, not really, you can't do that again. And yet it's because you lost his uncle. It adds a human element to the process. Yeah. And all that, and really empowers managers and owners to use data throughout the year instead of that annual review time. And most organizations, 60% of organizations that do the annual review actually do it at the end of the year. So, I track Google Analytics on searches. And a couple of weeks ago, annual review, the search for annual review was up 600+%. And it's because when you go through it, you don't like it and you want to replace it. But then as the year goes along and you get closer to December and you're just going to get through it again, then you decide to just, again, the devil instead of the devil you don't.
One of the things that I think is interesting is, and I have explored the software. I've used it. Very, very intuitive. Great product. Not long to take a survey. One of the things that I thought was fascinating about it was indexing and how you can index within a company and then index within an industry. So, as the expansion of the product goes and you're onboarding more and more companies, now you could say, all right, I'm in law firm ABC or real estate firm DEF. And how do we look internally? And
how do we rate?
How do we look to the industry? So, if the firm is always, indexing poorly, then, that's also kind of telling around, gee, maybe we need to take a harder look about how we treat our people, what our situation here, because we don't,
you might have a flawed
everyone else.
Yeah, you might be hiring the wrong people because your hiring process is flawed.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have to be the people all the time. And one of the things that Ripple does is we use data to empower companies to look at the big picture and to see that, if all your hires in February quit within a year and all your hires in June stay for 2.5 years, guess what? Do your hiring in June. It's really, it's all that, all the information we can gather for companies can be used in an effective way. And, when we look at the data, as important as it is to address blind spots or weaknesses employees might have, it's equally, if not more important, to celebrate the successes and the accomplishments of your employees, because that's what resonates. When someone screws up, to tell them they screwed up usually is obvious. It's a question of when they succeed and are they getting the amount of recognition for that success. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but if you succeed in April and you don't hear about it until December during your annual review, even if it's a positive in December, I've gone 9 months thinking no one going to pat me on the back for what I did in April, and then nothing in May, nothing in June and then in December they mention it. You don't get the net benefit. You don't get the love. You don't get the appreciation from the employee. So why not? If you're going to do it eventually in December, do it in April.
Do you feel that people are using the tool to make more informed decisions about salary?
Yeah. So what Ripple does is we hate the annual review, right? There's a bunch of reasons we don't like it, but one of the main reasons we don't like it, and there have been books written on it, is that 75% of the time your annual review is followed immediately by your compensation discussion. So your raise, your bonus, net benefits, extra vacation, that kind of stuff. So it's just too much to handle, And so we divorce our data from salary, because you may make a business decision that you got someone in the sales team that is a toxic employee, and people rate him low or rate her low, but guess what? She sells 5 times the amount of product that the next closest person does. So I make a business decision that I'm going to keep her or him on and try to, minimize the toxicity. But, from a P&L perspective, there are people that companies will keep on because it's good for the bottom line. And if Ripple says that person is toxic, we empower the manager to at least know, or the owner to know, that this person, maybe get him or her help, maybe
Right.
get coaching, maybe we work with a lot of development professional coaches that are specifically partnered with us, so that we can tell companies, don't fire Joe. Right? Joe's tremendously productive when it comes to sales. He's just a negative guy. Guess what? Tell Joe you're working from home. For the foreseeable future, we're gonna put you in remote, get you a consultant, get you some coaching help, and see if we can right the ship. So yeah, we don't really tie ourselves to compensation. And I mean, practically speaking, you've worked at big companies. I've worked at big companies. If the company does well financially, that compensation discussion is usually better, a more positive discussion. And if the company does poorly, the compensation discussion is usually not as positive, right? So that
Right.
doesn't have that doesn't have an impact on how I have interacted with my coworkers, and nor should it. So my net, it's called the ripple effect, your impact on the organization. That should be seen for the 12 months that I've been working with my coworkers, versus, okay, you're okay, and here's a 2% raise and a $5,000 bonus. It creates an atmosphere where the person being reviewed is just waiting for the numbers. They're not hearing anything, even if the manager is trying to be productive and share information that could be valuable in the development of that employee. The employee is hearing nothing until they talk about the raise and the bonus. So
Yeah.
I received the annual review for several years, and then I gave them, and the process is just flawed.
It's so interesting too. My own brother works for a large insurance company. Just went through a similar experience with this. Uh, Changes of managers over the course of the year, changes of responsibility over the course of the year. Onshore team in America, offshore team in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So probably two or three different managers over the course of the year. And now review didn't come out the way he expected it to,
Mm-hmm.
and he's now literally writing up literally volumes and pages of work to show what he did across three different managers in the office, now at home for a year, taking on night and weekend work that he didn't have before. And this is like the case study to show that, had this been really looked at month over month, he would not be having the conversation that he did.
Yep.
He was extremely distraught about the outcome, had to do many, many calls after to get it to a better place. And, it really colored him on the view of the organization and how they really plugged into the workforce. So again,
And
I
I
mean,
tell you what, if a competitor comes along and offers him, the same role, a lot of 80% of people leave jobs not based on compensation. So it's not a financial decision. They might make more at the next job, but the reason they left was not because of compensation. Think about that. 80%, 4 out of 5 people that leave their jobs, it's not because of the money. So what's it about? Yeah, there are life events. People get divorced. People move to the West Coast because they want more sun. But the vast majority of those decisions are based on the culture, the inability for management to communicate to their people, or owners to communicate to their managers. So if that's the case, your brother right now has a negative impression of the structure and operations of that organization. That stays with him. We're humans.
yeah,
We can't. You don't wake up the next day and forget everything that happened.
yeah. I mean, it's the stories like it are rampant. That's why I love this product so much, and every chance I have to talk about it, I do, because now I think more than ever, uh, doing these surveys and really being plugged into the workforce, your team, management, really up and down the whole corporate structure, you need to do it.
Yep.
Let's
And
spend
we can also customize. So a lot of organizations will tell us that they need to track data along certain metrics within their industry, for example.
yeah,
So I'm like, okay, what are the metrics? And then I create surveys for them so that they can create. A lot of organizations I speak with, they don't even use technology as part of the process. So they'll they'll email, their HR people will email it Google Doc for you to complete, 18 questions about somebody, 5 people you work for, right? So you have to take the time and effort to complete something. And then once you get that data, unless you're entering into an Excel spreadsheet or some other form of trackable and traceable data analytics, you're you're just doing a compliance exercise. You're doing
Mhm.
a check the box. You got to do it every year. You do it, and guess what? Year 4, you end up just copying and pasting what you did for the person the year before because you don't think management's using that anyway, and most of the time they don't.
Talk a little bit about, and this is top of mind with a lot of people, but as things slowly are improving, this vaccine, people are slowly coming back to the workplace, albeit not at the numbers that
Hmm.
it needs to be. What's kind of your outlook around how people will return to work? And from my perspective, what I've seen is kind of the extremes where we're getting rid of the office, never to return, or we're bringing everyone back because we're a CPA firm and all our records and data and everything is in the office and we can only deal with clients that way. So those are kind of the poles. I think the middle is kind of where it'll land, with some kind of hybrid: 3 on, 2 off, 2 on, 3 off, 4 1, 1 4. What's your view on how you think things will shake out of this whole crisis?
I in terms of how things shake out, I think it's going to be an industry specific answer. I think certain industries will change or modify their approaches and their business models. But overall, I think from a talent perspective, you're going to have everything, all everything on those extremes and everything in between. I think, and
Mhm.
it'll be based on a company wide. I mean, if you just signed a 10-year lease, you're going to have people come back because you're going to use the office in some capacity. If
Mhm.
you want to take the hit and cancel the lease and whatever financial, penalties that might be involved, then maybe you do it because it might make more sense. But I think the importance of employee feedback on how they're faring in whatever the new reality is critical to success. Because if you're a business owner and you've never gone through what all business owners went through in the last 12 months, and you made some decisions, some good ones, some bad ones, and you learn from each type of decision, and you're not willing to at least entertain remote workforce as a solution to certain people, because people are going to be nervous. People with pre-existing conditions are going to have levels of concern that people without pre-existing conditions are not going to have. People who are 48 are not going to be as concerned as 75-year-olds. I think on an individual basis, the companies will do what they have to do to survive. Good companies do, right? And if you're a bad company and you have a model that barely worked before COVID, chances are you didn't make it. And so when you look to find how your people are doing, how they're interacting, how they're succeeding, how they're becoming more productive in the COVID and post-COVID world, you're going to want to use those success stories to implement proper decision making. And as an owner, I would want to see the data on my 20, 25, 50, 75 people to see who might be the best candidate. Those personality traits, you can place those people that are better or more productive from home. And if they're nervous about coming back to work and they're just as productive or more productive from home, there's no real harm in that.
Mhm.
And I think smart, savvy, forward-thinking business owners will hopefully adopt that mentality when addressing, whether people have to come back in the office. I mean, you talk about manufacturing and physical, the need to be physically on site. That's different. I mean,
Yes.
but for the accounting firm, if all your paper is still in paper files in 2021, you're doing something wrong. I mean, because the stories of the companies that wouldn't let their people work from home, and then March happens and they struggled. They had to circle the wagons for a couple of months and figure out
Yeah.
how to have them work from home, but they
It's
did it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is, I have a friend of mine. He worked for a bank in the city, and they were adamant about him ever working from home. And he would say, "Look, I have a dentist appointment. I have a family issue. My dog's sick. Whatever it was. It was legitimate stuff." And they were like, "Sorry, no, 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 absolutely not." And then this came along, and he had to work from home for a year. So, that's the thing that makes it so interesting. It was a very, very long proving experiment. It wasn't like, even a power event or a snowstorm where you do it for a couple of days. This is a year-long proving exercise. It's
100%.
very, very hard to now turn back the clock and say, "Oh, you can't do it," because now the guy did it and basically didn't miss a beat. And oh, by the way, while he was doing it, guy a little bit older than me, his quality of life is so much better because he's not fighting the railroad, he's not commuting, he doesn't have the expense. He was traveling from New York to New Jersey on PATH trains. I mean, rugged commute where just getting to work would eat him up. And now it's like he sits down, he does the job, he's so much more relaxed. His productivity, I'm sure, it would on any survey would be far better. And he's essentially loving life. Yes, he misses his work colleagues, but he hasn't missed a beat on the job. So it's like we talk about it. It's like, yeah, how are they going to turn this back now? They won't be able to.
And it's also as technology gets better, right? I mean, the Zoom experience now versus March 2020. I mean, Microsoft Teams basically was developed. I mean, it was in development, but they pushed that hard because of the pandemic. I mean, if you don't use technology to make your work life experience better, then you're caught in 1990. I just, I don't. Part of our explainer video talks about technology and people don't ride horses to work anymore. They don't use beepers. They don't use typewriters because technology evolves. And if you used technology to work remotely and survive COVID, right? The COVID corporate experience, and you still use an annual review where, your managers basically shoot from the hip once a year. I can't. Usually I'll tell companies that cling to that process. I'm like, I don't think we need to talk anymore because chances are you're never going to adopt what I'm selling because you're caught decades ago in what used to be the norm.
Mm-hmm. We're getting close to the end of time on the show. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to first put on a banner here. Let me get it going. That's your contact information.
It is. Thank you.
Now I get to the fun part of the show, one of my favorites. It's the final 4 questions, and they're short form, but thought-provoking. So the first question is, and I love this with the guests, besides working, what do you do for fun?
I love to ski. I was born on a farm in Vermont. Love to ski. I've been skiing since I was 2.5.
Have you been able to do it this year?
Yeah, I was. They were very. Mount Snow is my mountain of choice, and they were very restrictive in terms of who could ride the lifts. And so you wait 40 minutes for a lift, and then take a 6-7 minute run down, and then you wait another 40 minutes. So it wasn't great, but they had a great snow year up in Vermont. They had a lot of natural snow, so the skiing was pretty good.
That's awesome. Next one is
that was easy.
Next one may be a little bit harder. So I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and most people like to say, "Oh yeah, you're successful. You've had a lot of different companies. What's your greatest failure? What's a failure that you've had in business, and how have you kind of overcome that?"
It was with my second job, and I stayed too long. I knew I didn't belong, and it was before going out on my own. So I guess it was before my entrepreneurial spirit took over. But I stayed at the same job for about 2.5 years after knowing that I would not stay here for the rest of my professional career. So staying in something after it's established that it's not for you is a horrible waste of your life. 2.5 years just kind of no man's land. So yeah, that would probably be the biggest failure.
I've had some similar experiences, and no regrets, but definitely I think there's a time where you kind of feel like this is getting a little long in the tooth, and yeah, it takes some courage to move on, but I think generally you're better off for it.
Well, and that's what I did. I waited and waited because I didn't know if I could make it on my own, and I didn't want to start my law practice if there was no security. And people believe if you're a W-2 that you have security, that there's some security in knowing that you're getting a check every 2 weeks. But as my mentor at the time told me, he goes, "You have no security working for the person I was working for." He's like, "You're his biggest line item. Yours most, your salary is by far the biggest line item. So if things go south, first guy he's getting rid of, he's you." So I was like, "Yeah, okay." And then about a month later, I resigned. So
okay, yeah, that's good. Good, definitely a great answer. So next question, number 3, is what is your definition of success?
Uh, well, Mark Twain said, if you're happy with what you do professionally, you don't work a day in your life. So I think happiness, is my definition of success. If you're happy, then you're doing something right on a lot of levels. Not fake happiness, not the people and I know that drive great cars and have huge houses and travel to all these exotic areas. Because if you're not happy, all the success in the world doesn't the monetary success doesn't mean anything.
Absolutely. 100% true. And then this is the final question. So you have this product, you clearly are passionate about it. What's the last thing, Mark, that you want to make on, it's not the industry, but on the process, I would say. It's not an industry specific tool, but what's the last thing, legacy or impression that you want to make by virtue of doing this business?
I want to be happier. I want, if you're self-aware, you're generally happier. And I think there's not enough emphasis on how to get there. Obviously, if you're happy in general, you're fine. But if you're not happy with your current position at your employer, and it may be that you need to move. Like if our data shows the employee gets their dashboard, so I get to see how I'm doing, how my colleagues are rating me, and maybe it's just not the right fit. So if we can help managers and owners make data-driven decisions, but also help employees realize that maybe it's not a right fit at their current employer. Our My dream is that your ripple effect score follows you professionally, and you post it on your LinkedIn profile. That industry wide acceptance of what we're doing is there. And when you move jobs and you say, okay, I'm going from XYZ Corp to ABC Inc. I'm at XYZ Corp and they have a 4.3 as their company average, and I'm going to ABC Inc. and their company average ripple effect score is a 3.1. Maybe I don't want to go to ABC. Maybe I want to look a little harder. And
Mhm.
so yeah, that's the last thing we want it to help both the managers, owners, and employees.
It's awesome. I love it. Totally love what you guys are doing, and I wish you all the best with it. So, if
Thanks.
people are trying to find you, Noah, where can they find you? What channels are you on? What's your contact information? I have your email obviously on the bottom, but where else can they
Yeah, I'm
find it?
on LinkedIn. I'm Instagram, Facebook. Ripple has Facebook. The easiest way to get me is to email me, noah@ripplecrew.com. This is flying across the bottom of the screen. But yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. We get LinkedIn, see if we can help each other. And yeah, it's easy
Okay,
as that.
that's perfect. So, I'm Jeff Hawk. If you need to reach me regarding commercial real estate or prop tech or technology related to real estate, I'm also on all the channels: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Big contributor on LinkedIn. And my telephone number, 516-636-6600. And that's a wrap.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.